In a previous post, I began narrating the commentary on a chapter in the Bible, namely Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53 explained, "This chapter will change your life," by Mitch Glaser. So in a previous post, I read through the introduction and foreword of this book, and now I'm going to continue on with the narration. But before doing so, I'd like to read the back cover real quick to give you a recap of the idea of what this commentary is explaining. Quote, "Do you have any questions about the meaning of life and spirituality? Maybe it is time to go right to the source and rethink your relationship with the Creator." Isaiah 53 explained will help kickstart your personal pilgrimage and introduce you to a chapter in the scriptures that has the potential to revolutionize your life. Isaiah 53 explained makes the story of the Bible understandable, practically and simply explaining how you can have a soul-satisfying relationship with God and revealing the surprising key that makes this relationship possible. So there's a summary. Now we begin our narration in chapter 1, continuing in the reading of Isaiah 53 explained. Now I'd encourage you to read the chapter perhaps before engaging with the material of this narration in this book. Isaiah 53 explained, chapter 1. I'm Jewish, now what? If most Jewish people today were to be completely honest, we might admit to being embarrassed by the idea that we are God's chosen people. It makes us uncomfortable to think there is something intimately special about being Jewish. Certainly, religious Jews have an easier time accepting that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. According to the more religious Jewish community, we are chosen to be faithful to God of Israel as we live in obedience to his laws revealed in the Torah given at Mount Sinai. Yet most of us are not religious, quote unquote religious. In fact, we may be disturbed by the apparent elitism of our fellow Jews who embrace this belief that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. To think that we as a people, are especially chosen by God seems narrow-minded and arrogant when viewed through the lens of our modern multicultural world. We can easily accept our uniqueness as an ethnic group. We can celebrate the beauty of our heritage, just like Polish Americans, Italian Americans, African Americans, and Latin Americans. But to view ourselves as chosen seems to take uniqueness to an unwarranted degree. The burden of being chosen. What makes the Jewish people unique among the peoples of the world? I know this is not a question we ask ourselves or others every day, but it is something most of us who were raised as Jews still want to understand better. We might not let others know how important this is to us, but we know we are Jewish, and in some ways it has cost us a lot. Though it cost those who came before us much, much more. We know about the pogroms and the Crusades from the more distant past. And even in the 21st century, we Jews live with an ever-present awareness of the Holocaust. We ourselves might not be Holocaust survivors or the children of survivors, but we knew of survivors and have seen pictures of those who did not survive. In many ways, the Holocaust has shaped our lives and identities. The survival of the Jewish people is important to us because we are Jewish. Most of us want to see our people survive and our history and culture thrive. We have lost so much in the past century that the survival of our people, nation, culture, and religion, even if we're not especially religious, is important to us as Jews. Wouldn't you agree? What does it mean to be Jewish, aside from the variety of inside jokes that naturally pass through our minds when we consider this question? Chicken soup for a cold, getting straight A's in school. We all know the shtick. But I believe we also want answers that go deeper and are more thoughtful. For the most part, our Jewishness still determines how we handle the various rites of passage from childhood to adulthood. Being Jewish implies a certain way of relating to the world. Although we hold to the cultural norms that our mothers taught us, we suspect that there is much more to what it means to be a Jew. Maybe one of the most important questions to ask is, what does it mean to be, quote unquote, chosen? One of the clearest statements of Jewish ambivalence towards chosenness is found in a poignant moment in the Fiddler on the Roof. Tevi, the milkman, lifts his eyes to heaven and says, I know, we are your chosen people, but once in a while, you can't choose somebody else. The Jewish understanding of being chosen by God has been elusive and mysterious. Being chosen seems to have increased our burden far more than our joy. It has brought more trouble than triumph and has been a root cause for ongoing persecution. Some Gentiles have used Jewish chosenness as a basis for anti-Semitism. This has especially reflected poorly on relationships between Jews and quote-unquote Christians, even more so than between Jews and Muslims. An unfortunate sense of competition has developed over the centuries between these two great world religions that most or both understand themselves to be people chosen by God. This tension has led to a misunderstanding within historical Christianity that the Jewish people are no longer chosen and are in fact judged as a nation for rejecting Jesus. It is this belief that has caused many quote-unquote Christians throughout the centuries to view mistreatment of Jews as service to God. This might not be widespread today, but the residual tension continues and affects our mutual understanding. Is it any wonder that we have a hard time entertaining the thought that our own Bible would predict the very same Messiah who is viewed as the founder of Christianity? Given our history, it is almost impossible for us to understand Christianity as a Jewish movement that is also welcoming of Gentiles. If we believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, then we would have to rework our understanding of Christianity and view it as something Jewish rather than as something foreign and Gentile. This would be very difficult for most of us. Historically, we have had a difficult time even considering the idea that the Messiah was to suffer and die before he would reign as king. As you will see in chapter 10, there are strains of this thinking in the Mishnah and other rabbinic writings that actually suggest this very same thing. But I know that it is hard to open our minds to this possibility if it might lead us to accept the very Messiah embraced by those who persecuted our forefathers. This makes it very difficult for us to take an objective look at Isaiah chapter 53. Furthermore, if Jesus is the Jewish Messiah and is also the Messiah for the Gentiles, then what exactly is unique about our being chosen by God? What then is the destiny and purpose of the Jewish people? Chosen without a chooser. There is a Maccabi beer advertisement, popular in Israel, in which the tagline reads, Maccabi beer, the beer that chosen people choose. The very reason for the Jewish people is reduced to a pithy marketing statement used to sell beer. However, this shouldn't be surprising. The tagline was surely penned by a Jewish writer who was uncertain of what it actually means to be the chosen people. Today, the very notion of one people claiming to be chosen is repugnant. All of the great political movements of the recent past, from the French Revolution onward, were designed to break down the notion of a privileged class, and the idea of a chosen people is considered regressive. There were Jewish people at the forefront of these social movements, from France to Russia to the United States. In fact, the classless society is often a far more cherished idea for Jewish people than the thought of being chosen by God for a special purpose. As Jewish Americans, we are proud to say that one of our fundamental ideals is to treat all people as equals. Why then should one group be viewed as chosen? It goes against the very philosophical fabric of our society and that of most Western countries. The question of chosenness is also a cause for deep self-questioning by the Jewish people. What impact would it have if we really believed that there is a God who created us as individuals and as a people with a divine purpose? We would certainly want to discover what that divine purpose is for our lives, would we not? Where do we turn for answers? The very idea that we have been chosen implies that there is a chooser. How can we try to understand our chosenness without coming to terms with the chooser? We know that the Jewish people are unique. We have a distinct history and certain common cultural traits that are intertwined with those of the nations where other people have settled over the centuries, whether we are Sephardi or Ashkenazi, whether we are from the former Soviet Union, Israel, Poland, or North Africa. We're bound to one another as Jews. However, the notion of chosenness is more than religious celebrations, foods, and the bonds of a common national history. There's something far deeper that underlies our heritage. It is the idea that we have been chosen by the Creator for a holy and special purpose. Until we discover this purpose, by first of all building a relationship with the one who chose us, we will not be fulfilled as Jews or as human beings. Perhaps you have already tried to determine the significance of being a Jew without reading the Bible, and have found the answers to be fleeting and shallow. This is because it is only through understanding the Bible can we understand the mystery of our chosenness, as this is where the idea is first mentioned and developed. In reading the scriptures, we discover the God who chose us and the reasons why he did. as well as his purposes for the nations of the world. This will be a search well worth pursuing, and doing so will enrich your life. When we understand and embrace the chosenness of the Jewish people as described in the Bible, we will begin to comprehend what it means to be Jewish. However, this search might lead to a surprising destination, so let's keep an open mind. In fact, it is only by understanding our being chosen by God that we can begin to fathom the miracle of our ongoing national existence. There's no doubt in my mind that in the reasonable course of history, the Jewish people should have been obliterated. Yet, not only have we survived, but we have also thrived. Today, we find ourselves back in our land, speaking our language, and having profound influence on the world stage. And if I recall, Hebrew at one point was almost a dead language. Mark Twain, an agnostic and skeptic, knew that the continued existence of the Jewish people was unusual and remarkable. He wrote in 1899, "The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and then they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?" He wrote this half-century before the modern state of Israel was established. And even more profoundly, he wrote this prior to the Holocaust. I can only imagine what Twain would have said in light of these two events. They would have further strengthened his observation about the quote-unquote immortality of the Jewish people. Neither the dominance of foreign nations, nor the Crusades, nor persistent persecution in Eastern Europe, nor ultimately Hitler's final and destructive quote-unquote solution to the Jewish question could destroy the Jewish people as a whole. Even if we have not shown up in a synagogue since the day we heard our rabbi say, "Today you are a man or a woman," we cannot deny that there is something supernatural about the ongoing existence of the Jewish people. How is it possible to explain this modern miracle outside of the fact that there is a God who chose our people and continues to preserve our nation? The continued existence of the Jewish people and the establishment of the modern state of Israel argue persuasively and passionately for the existence of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And since the future of Israel was established and assured by the scriptures, these ancient documents, compiled into what we now call the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, or the Old Testament, Torah, must be taken very seriously. The biblical perspective, in order to understand the idea of chosenness in Judaism, we need to examine the biblical passage where it is described. Though we might attend synagogue here and there and have a great appreciation for our history and religion, we still might be unfamiliar with the actual biblical foundations upon which the idea of our being chosen rests. Some of us who are fairly typical post bar mitzvah dropouts recognize in the depths of our souls that without understanding the Jewish Bible, it would be very difficult to fully understand who we are as Jews. We simply cannot adequately explain the question of our chosenness without taking into consideration the existence of a God who is capable of choosing and the book in which the spiritual origins of our peoplehood have been described. Where else can we turn for answers? Perhaps you believe that the Bible is just a book of Jewish history. Maybe you see it at the basic and fundamental religious document of the Jewish people, as well as of Christians and Muslims, for that matter. Perhaps to you it is simply a collection of interesting readings, ethical and moral aphorisms, beautiful psalms and poetry, and the wisdom and knowledge of our people accumulated over the centuries. And I would add here that much of modernity, modern mankind, despises the Bible, attempts to discredit its validity, and speak against its wisdom. So the question there is why? Why? Why indeed? In the chapters that follow, we will examine the evidence for the reliability and credibility of the scriptures. But no matter how you currently view the Bible, I am sure that as you read, your soul will be enriched and your Jewish identity will deepen. At the very least, you will better understand the source of this concept of Jewish chosenness. The choosing of Abraham, the choosing of the Jewish people began with the choosing of a man and a woman, Abraham, Abram at that time, and Sarah, then Sarai. These Semitic nomads were called by God to be the parents of a new nation, according to the text. Their chances of becoming parents to anyone, let alone a nation, were unlikely. It is interesting that God did far more than simply choose the Jewish people. He actually created a nation from a man and a woman who were far beyond the years of natural childbearing. This first encounter between God and Abram is recorded in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto the land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and be thou a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, and him that curses you will I curse. And in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. God promised to create a country in which this miraculously created people would live. And he even set the borders for the new country. Note the boundaries outlined in Genesis 15:18. In that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. At this point, something enters my mind. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Seems like an echo, but not something given by God. Perhaps, in a jihadist zeal, that statement is ignorantly put forth. Just a thought. Continuing. In the book of Genesis, God asserted himself as both creator and chooser of the chosen people. He promised miraculously to provide a son for Abram and Sarah, and then to create a nation from their descendants. He made a number of profound personal promises to Abram as well. And the Bible declares there indeed is a God, a creator. And that said, it also says there's an adversary. So it doesn't take too much of a guess to deduce that being chosen by God would indeed inflame the adversary's rage. So with that said, I would say Satan is the instigator of Jewish persecution and anti-Semitism throughout the world. Continuing, however, the real focal point of the text is found in chapter 12, verse 3, where from the Creator himself we learn of the divine rationale for the existence of the Jewish people. This fact further confirmed in the writings of the prophets is that the nation of Israel was created by God for the benefit of the nations of the world. The Jewish people were created by God to be a source of blessing to non-Jews. And so, because Satan is envious of this fact, we see this onslaught and war against the Jewish nation. In the books of the prophets, Israel is called to be a light to the nations and a witness to God's truth in his cosmic courtroom. Traditionally, Jewish people have understood this as God's call upon our people to bring the message of ethical monotheism to a world that worshipped a plethora of gods and idols. The Jewish people were called to tell the world about the good God who demanded that citizens of his righteous kingdom care for the poor and marginalized. He condemned the sacrifice of children, the institution of temple prostitution, and other horrific practices performed in the name of religion that can't otherwise be mentioned. Horrific indeed. That especially oppressed women, children, and those deemed defenseless by the ancient world. Even if you are an agnostic, or not sure, or an atheist, or convinced that there is no God, and subscribe to more contemporary interpretations, you might still understand Israel's national mandate expressed by the author of Genesis in terms of specific obligations to bring the message of Torah, ethics, to a world in desperate need. However, although the Jewish people were created and called by God to bring blessings to the world, we were not told specifically what these blessings might be. Shall we understand the blessings Jewish people are to bring to the world as Torah-based ethical monotheism, or is there something more? Rabbi Saul, better known as the Apostle Paul, wrote in his letter to the earlier followers of Yeshua living in the region of Galatia in Turkey, which is where the book of Galatians got its name, that the ultimate blessing the Jewish people would bring to the world was Yeshua, the Messiah. Jesus, Yeshua, is a rendition of the more formal Joshua, which is also a book in the Old Testament. Yeshua was a descendant of Abraham and David, a Jewish man born of a Jewish mother, depicted as the Jewish Messiah for all people. It is interesting that today more Gentiles accept the Tanakh, embrace ethical monotheism, and believe in the principles of the Torah than anyone would have ever imagined. And this is largely in part due to the development of the Christian religion as well. This could not have been accomplished if Yeshua had not been widely accepted by the Gentiles. Perhaps Rabbi Saul, or Paul, was not far off in describing him as the ultimate blessing the Jewish people would give to the world. So what's so special about being Jewish? Although our people's survival is miraculous, we were created to do much more than simply survive. God chose the Jewish people to have a relationship with him personally and as a nation, so that we would pass along the blessings of that relationship to the nations of the world. We will be happiest when we embrace that call on our people and on our lives. Ultimately, the greatest blessing we would bring to the world would be the Messiah. But how and when would this Messiah come and bring about an age of peace and prosperity? Has it taken so long, and is the world so hopeless that we should simply forget it and move on? The Jewish people have a divine destiny and were chosen by God to bring the Messiah to the world. All else that we do may be viewed as preparing to fulfill our national destiny as God's instruments of ultimate shalom, or peace, for the world. As Jewish people, we are at our best when we understand God's desire for our people and participate with him in his plan. God, in fact, planned a messianic surprise appearance, quote unquote, as the Messiah entered the scene in a wholly unforeseen way. Or was it? Read on and you will see. To be continued. End of chapter 1. Isaiah 53 explained. Mitch Glaser. Thank you for listening.